for anyone who's here today who isn't a RIPT user, and if you'd like to try out any of the features that we discussed today, you can start a free trial for 1 month at ript.app. So that's www.rypt.app. So with that, I'll pass you over to Cormac, who's going to bring you through the blocks function in RIPT.
Thanks, Roy. There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Cormac O'Byrne. I am the co-founder of RIPT. So thanks for everyone for joining us today that's on the line, and anyone who's watching on the recording as well. So we built RIPT to help coaches coach more effectively and efficiently. So evidence-based coaching is accessible to all athletes. And I'm going to hand you over to Neil Welch in a minute. Neil is a performance coach who's worked at the elite level in the GAA in the Premier League. And he's going to talk you through basically how he uses the blocks feature in practice to deliver athletic development programming and also individualized rehab and prehab to his athletes. But first of all, I'm going to talk you through the blocks feature and where it came from. So the problems that we were seeing, and we kept seeing while talking to coaches and our customers, was that the best programs were always living in 1 or 2 coaches' heads in the organization. And every time a plan gets built, it's then lost and then rebuilt from scratch every time. So this leads to a couple of different problems. So the scenario or the block of the session is handled differently across all staff, so there's no consistency in the delivery over the course of the year or longer. Any new staff that come in, they start with basically a blank page, and they're building all these things from scratch as well. And individualizing things for a full squad just takes much too much time. And we saw that really no one should be building the same program twice or the same part of the session twice. So it's important to notice or to mention as well that we didn't create this problem. This is what coaches were telling us, and we built the blocks feature directly with coaches and from their feedback to fix 3 main problems, which I'll take you through now. So first of all was the consistency problem. We were seeing that, whether it's a return to play progression, whether it's a strength block, mobility, prehab, whatever element of your session that you're building, that it should be built in a shared library for everyone to contribute to and work from. So everybody in the organization is working from the same standard. And the knowledge anymore in the organization, it's not locked into one coach's head, but it's shared with the whole coaching team to be used with the athletes. The second big problem we were trying to solve with the feature then is individualization. So to give coaches a library of blocks that they can then drop into any athlete's program and quickly adjust what needs adjusting, rather than building everything from scratch. So this opens up individualization on a bigger scale when you're working with a whole squad, so that you're tailoring it on the spot without starting over each time and literally individualizing an athlete's program in seconds. And then the final thing is time. So instead of rebuilding your workouts every week, you can use the blocks feature to combine them into new sessions and programs. And as Neil's going to take you through in a minute, build up your sessions and your programs in seconds and minutes, and save hours that can go into actually coaching the athletes and not doing the admin side and building your programs. So I'll hand you over to Neil now, and he's going to talk you through how he's built his own library within RIPT and how he uses it to deliver individualized programs to his athletes day in, day out. So I'll just stop sharing here and you can take over, Neil.
Thanks, Cormac. Okay, can you see that okay, Cormac?
Yeah, that's coming through.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks everyone for taking a bit of time out to watch this presentation. I'm going to just walk through a couple of slides around the background or the I guess the theoretical side for the implementation of this, and then we'll go into a screen share through RIPT itself. Just to give you a bit of background on where my kind of thought process comes from this is I worked for 11 years at the sports surgery clinic in Santry, where we worked quite hard on developing rehab systems and rehab interventions, and finding ways to to best design and deliver those across a large department, and a department often had a degree of staff churn to it. I have 6 seasons under the belt with Kildare, so applying the same sort of thought processes and particularly the injury prevention side in an inter-county setting, and so I understand the constraints and the demands of programming for those groups, and also the implementation of that. I now work for myself, where I deliver either face-to-face or online rehab interventions. So I use RYPT in order to be able to improve the efficiency of my programming that way. And again, the blocks feature is a big part of that. And I'm also currently working as a consultant in the Premier League, trying to help teams to, off the back of screening, implement individualization training as well. And again, the block side of things becomes a really kind of key feature of that. So when we're talking about blocks, I think it's worth just understanding where that sits. So we obviously know, I'll work backwards from the 4 to 1 here. Our library is where we're going to store all of our kind of knowledge base as a practitioner or as a group of practitioners. So spending a bit of time in terms of setting up either your own exercise structures or, as we'll talk today, block structures becomes a really important and probably the most important feature, because that's what you're going to draw all your knowledge from. At a macro view, then we're going to build a training program, which is going to be made of a number of different training sessions. And as a practitioner, as a group of practitioners, we're going to be fairly, or hopefully fairly consistent across the board with the sessions and the structure of those programs, particularly if you work in a sport like GAA, where we know we're going to be on pitch twice a week, and there's going to be 2 gym sessions. So we're going to have a structure of 2 different types of sessions that kind of make up that program realistically throughout the year. The most important part, and again, like when we talk about sessions in general, we're going to split between gym-based, and we might have a couple of gym-based type style sessions if there's some conditioning work in there, or strength focused. But broadly speaking, we're going to have a pitch or a gym-based session. Where we need to, and you need to spend a little bit of time thinking in order to be able to get the most out of the block design, is how you can kind of break that session up into its kind of component parts. Now, that cutoff is going to be different for everyone depending on the way you're implementing the session. But I want to give you a bit of an overview of how I kind of break the blocks down across my practice. So number 1 is where I have hip health and shoulder health blocks, and that forms or falls underneath joint health. And I use that as part of the injury prevention elements of my program. I know then after doing my joint health components of my training sessions, I'm going to step into a warm-up. And the warm-up is generally numbers 2 and 3 on the slides here. So I have a general athletic component where I have a series of crawl challenges, squat-based challenges, and standing challenges, where I want to make sure I'm working on, say, my hinge patterns, squat patterns, and any kind of crawl-based work within that part of the training session. Then I move into kind of a specific athletic development component. So this might involve jumping, and that's become a bigger feature of the programs over the last 2 years with the changes to GAA rulings, more emphasis on getting up off the ground and winning kickouts. I might have running technique components, and then I spend a lot of time working on change of direction. So I have blocks in around deceleration, transitions, and kind of lateral explosive. The next layer, the isolated strength, comes from more of a rehab focus. So if I'm rehabbing somebody, say, with a hamstring injury, one part of the session is going to require some isolated hamstring work. I know what my go-to exercises are there, which I've built into blocks, and I'll walk you through that in a moment. But rehab shouldn't just stop at the isolated exercises as part of the rehab. In general, you're going to want to build in the rest of a training session. So I might still want some anterior chain lifts next to my hamstring exercises. I'm still going to want to program some vertical and horizontal push, pull, and trunk work. And that's true of any program, but it's also true in the rehab environment. And as I said, like breaking up my blocks beforehand and having them pre-built is going to really speed up that process for me. So how that looks for a session for me, in general, I'm going to have some sort of joint health at the front end. So I'll have a block or 2 blocks as part of that. I'm going to have my general athletic development and specific athletic development blocks. Now, oftentimes I'll just build warm-ups, so gym-based warm-ups that incorporate all that, because I know I'm going to kind of touch off that at all times. If required, I can build out the individual blocks for, say, my crawl challenges or squat challenges or standing challenges, and I do that within my online rehab as well. Then I'm into the strength elements, so isolated strength work, my chain integration and kind of push-pull, and then trunk to finish off the training session. So I've kind of built that taxonomy over time, and it kind of morphs as a practitioner, and depending on, from a business perspective, the way I'm looking at it as well. But I think I've got pretty good clarity at the moment of the way I program and the way I want to make my my sessions look. And I think that's an important part of best utilizing the blocks. Because I have that clarity, I'm able then to create my blocks library. So I'm in the programming section within RYPT here, and these are the blocks that I'm talking about. So I have an anterior chain 1 block. I'm using a trap bar squat and a split squat within that. I have my my reps pre-built, number of sets in there. I'm just keeping it as a 3, and I have them listed as straight sets within this particular block. And you've got options in the way you kind of use these. So these can either be progressions. So you might say, if you're using that like for long-term athlete development and you were wanting to walk an athlete through a series of progressions over time, you could use these blocks in order to be able to lay out those progressions. With the athletes I work with, it's predominantly, I use them more as alternatives. So I know like in a 6-week block, I want to make sure there's an anterior chain component with my training session. The following 6-week block, I also want an anterior chain component. They're just going to be different exercises because the athletes I'm working with are well trained and have been exposed to the majority of these kind of exercise interventions before. So as I mentioned, I've got my anterior chain stuff. There's some isolated work. I've got my calf exercises set up for my kind of calf rehab, explosive blocks, and then my gym warm up, as I said. So I've got some squat-based challenges in here, some standing-based challenges, a little bit of plyometric and jumping work in here that I'm able to push out to my athletes really quickly. And because I've spent a bit of time, it does take a little bit of time to build these things up, and there's a little bit of organization required. But because I've done that across my training session, it makes it very easy now for me to start building out my program. So if I'm to go into a workout, I'm going to create a new workout here just to demonstrate. And I'm going to start adding blocks. I know that I want a gym warm-up. I'm going to want some isolated work, so I'll use that hamstring example. My hamstring work goes in there. Because I'm concentrating on the posterior chain as part of the rehab, I'm going to put an anterior chain block next to that for my heavy strength. I want there's going to be a horizontal push-pull day. So I'm going to put my horizontal push-pull work in there, and then I'm going to finish off with some trunk work. Okay, so I save and close the session, and that's it essentially built. Okay, I have all my warm-ups within there. I've got my hamstring interventions. I can spend more time kind of coaching that with the athlete if I'm in that sort of scenario. Or if I'm programming for an athlete who is just injured and is coming back down to the gym for that evening, you can see there from a programming perspective how quick that is for me to create those sessions. And if needs be, I can build my progressions as normal within the platform. What I also want to do is just show you how quickly it is to kind of individualize some of this. So I'm going to just take you through a training session I have here. I have my gym session kind of pre-built. And let's say this athlete is kind of reported a bit of a shoulder niggle, and we need to start adding in a little bit more push-pull. And I want to go a little bit more vertical. I'm going to add that into the training session, and that's done. Because again, like I said, I've already spent time kind of creating those blocks in the background. I'm able to make edits to that training session really quickly, and individualize those training programs with not too much hassle at all. Bit of a whistle-stop tour through the block design and the building side of things. But I'd be happy to, we've got another few minutes left on the call to start taking some questions if anyone has them, or if Cormac, if you've anything you want to ask, we want to discuss a little bit further.
Yeah, thanks both. I might kick things off first, Neil, if that's okay. And Cormac. So like if I'm coaching, let's say, in my club, and we're very much a resource straps and coach straps, and if I'm the kind of the athletic development lead for the club and there's only one person in the club leading that out, like what might that look like in practice in that club, and how can blocks be used in that context? Hello?
I think Neil is frozen there, is he?
Oh, is he?
No. Sorry, I thought you said that was for Cormac, Rory. Sorry.
Oh no, sorry, for both you guys.
Yeah. No, well, I can jump into that one, yeah, for sure. So like, again, it's all in the organization. So you need to think about the different groups you're potentially delivering to. So you might have the ladies section, the boys section, junior sections, and just thinking about what those training sessions are going to look like for those individuals, and the amount of maybe oversight they're going to have in the training sessions. So the first thing that might come to mind there within the junior sections of the club is designing out your on-pitch warm-ups, so that your coach has access to that. So rather than necessarily them having to think of a warm-up every single training session, they have something visible on their side pre-session for them to be able to walk all their athletes through. And that means you can get good consistency across all of the age groups really easily, with just a little bit of, I guess, front loading of the work in designing those training blocks. And then you, from a gym perspective, could start thinking about the same things and build it really easily, kind of building a bit of a curriculum for your club, in that if you're going to start the earlier age groups, let's say we were starting around under 14, you can build your athletic development blocks where you might be thinking of lunge pattern, squat pattern, hinge pattern, maybe including some upper push pull in there, and you can be a little bit more structured around, well, this is the exercise start point that these athletes are going to start this journey on. And I'm going to build an 8 or even a longer 10, 12-week block for these individuals. If they've got access to the hall and the coach is kind of bringing them through it, they've got a program to follow straight away that you can be kind of fairly confident as a coach that you've done all the oversight and are happy with all the exercise selections that are kind of going in there. So again, as I said, like, most of the work is done in just mapping out the scenarios that you might have to deal with and matching some of the blocks to those scenarios. And then after that, it's just putting it in the hands of the people who are going to be sat in front of the athletes, really.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think it's a... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. No,
I was going to say, I think it's a really interesting use case of the blocks feature and how you can apply it to create consistency across the whole club. Like even if you're quite limited in terms of time and resources, you can create, like you said, that curriculum there that you can disseminate throughout and have this kind of this step base that runs through the athletic development of the club, and there's no reason why clubs shouldn't have that with a product like RYPT.
Absolutely, and just to add to what Neil said as well, I guess it's on the youth athletic development side is like building out those kind of set progressions that then coaches can then move the youth athletes safely through their progressions as they want to move on to the next movement pattern, start adding load, all of that. You can have all of that pre-built into the system and ensure that it's giving that consistency across the club as well.
I know Neil has to drop off at some stage, so it'll just be myself and Cormac taking the questions. So whenever you need to drop off, feel free, Neil. We have a question that's coming here from Connor. So it's asking about the block section and wondering if you can save blocks in certain folders for ease of use and navigation.
Currently no, but that is a feature we've gotten a lot of requests about as well. So we are going to be adding folders features to a couple of those lists, so to blocks, to workouts, and to programs. So that is a feature that's coming soon. Yeah, because we've been getting feedback around the naming convention and all that kind of thing to just allow you to sort them a bit easier. So that's definitely in the works, Connor.
Great. Sorry, just another one. It's just after coming in. Oh, sorry, that's Connor. I have another question around the progressions. If you still have a few minutes, Neil. Like what I suppose what that looks like in practice in RYPT. It'd be great to visualize that.
Yeah, sure. So will I just share a screen? That's probably the easiest. So maybe I come back to that workout that I just designed. Yeah, so progressions, let's say I've designed my training session here and I'm going to put it into a 6-week block. If I want to progress or progress any part of that training program over the course of, say, the next 6 weeks, I can do that really, really easily with within the progression side. So let's say I'm starting off and I'm focusing on the hamstring rehab here. I've got a couple of hamstring exercises and I want to do a simple kind of volume increase. I'm starting off with sets of 8 and sets of 6 in here. And I want to do just have a little progression up to, say, two sets increase a week. So rather than chasing a load progression, I'm going to chase a volume progression. And then go up to 12. I have that done now. So I've added what is I guess a relatively complex bit of programming to a training session in the space of whatever that took, 20 seconds. And then I can schedule that into, if I'm gonna pick starting from today and pick that individual who I just had there. Yeah, so we have that kind of appearing over the next 6 weeks for that athlete. So that should be in there kind of every Friday. Sorry now. Yeah. So yeah, like the progressions feature is one that kind of links in really nicely with the blocks in order to again just speed up programming. You think back in the day when you're having to do all this through Excel and it can get away from you very quickly when you're trying to manage multiple people. That progressions feature is a nice way to kind of tie in with the blocks then. I'll have to jump now, guys.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Neil.
Okay.
Anyway.
Thanks, Neil.
Appreciate it, guys. Bye now.
Yeah, I suppose another part of the Cormac is the time saving element, and that's kind of one of the main catalysts probably for using the blocks feature. You've probably had lots of conversations with different clients about the amount of time that they are actually saving. But I suppose, is there any kind of insight you can give us on that front?
Yeah, I guess it's hard to put an exact number on it, but I think you can see from what Neil was kind of demoing there, like how he's like pulling together a session in literally 10 seconds, and progressing that out over multiple weeks in less than a minute, and you can kind of build up a 6 or 8 week block of training then, you know, from your library in probably less than 5 minutes if your library is organized. And yeah, I don't think Neil shied away from the fact either that there is a bit of setup initially, you know, in terms of deciding how you want to structure your training sessions first and foremost, and then building out your library to kind of fit that, and then giving you then the flexibility when you're in season and time is tight that you can just, you know, churn those out very quickly and offer that individualization for your athletes as well. And it doesn't have to be as well something that you know, you have to get everything set up on day one. So maybe I'll just share my screen here again quickly and just show you, you know, there's a couple of ways in terms of building those blocks. Is my screen coming up there again?
Not yet. For me, yes.
Right. There we go. Sorry, just hadn't clicked confirm. So yeah, like if you're looking at your own library, you can build blocks from scratch, and you can start setting your library up here. You go create block and you start building those out. But also, if you haven't used the feature yet and you have pre-built workouts within RYPT, you can go into any of your sessions. So I'll just open up one of these sessions here. So let's say this 4-week progression that I've built out. If I go into the workout builder view here for one of those workouts, you have this save block option here. So if you have all of these pre-built blocks that you've built up in your workouts already, or you are just building them out over the season and you think, oh, this would be ideal to reuse in future sessions, you can go in here and you can click save block, and that will be added to your library. You know, so it's not something that you need to invest all of your time in upfront. You can kind of build that as you go if that's more convenient for you as well, you know.
Okay, so you can kind of almost do it on the fly, like when you're, let's say you're building out your program, and then you want to kind of integrate whatever element of that program, whatever portion of that program into your blocks, and then reuse it from there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, I might ask you one more question if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Is like one thing that I think about in terms of RYPT and how it's used is its transfer onto the field and use that, and kind of Neil alluded to it there. And I suppose like a lot of the time when we're thinking about programming tools, like we only think about them in the gym context, but I think there's an application for it on the field as well. And I suppose when you're speaking with clients and talk to them about their use of RYPT and their use of it on the field, what are they saying on that front?
Yeah, and that's really an area that we've focused on, I guess, in order to give you the flexibility with the workout builder tools that you can create your on-pitch sessions as well. And, you know, really collaborating with Neil to build out the library side of things as well, in terms of building, you know, more speed-focused exercise technique videos, more agility-focused. And, you know, that's, I don't know if anyone was on the webinar with Neil on Wednesday evening, but, you know, he spoke a lot about, you know, in terms of developing game speed and how important it is to drip feed that work into, you know, all of your sessions during the week. So putting that work into your on-pitch warm-ups. And again, that's the perfect use case for this feature. You know, you can have pre-designed blocks that you want to drop into your pitch sessions as well, you know, in terms of drip feeding in that you know, straight line speed work or that agility work into, you know, your warm-ups and post warm-up. So that can be scheduled in there, and all of your coaches then have access to that on the calendar, so they can take the players through those blocks on the pitch, you know, before the session. I think that's a really important element of it as well.
Yeah, like it's a great way of having somebody's thinking seep into a club on a wide level. Like I know we touched on it earlier, but I think it's just it's a brilliant use case of the product.
Yeah, and it's giving all of your coaches structure to work from, like, you know, so you're not because you know, especially in you know, a grassroots setting, time is always a challenge. So, you know, you're not rushing down in the car to training and trying to think of, you know, what warm-up exercises are we going to do when we get onto the pitch? Or, you know, oh, we need to do a bit of speed work tonight. What are we going to do? You can have all that pre-planned, pre-designed, and then ready on the calendar basically to go when you're arriving at training, you know.
Perfect. Okay, so we're bang on 2 o'clock, just 2:01. So we might wrap it up there, Cormac, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to say massive thanks to everyone for joining today, and like I said, the recording will be available, and we'll send that out, and I'll hand it over to you, Cormac, for the final goodbye.
Yeah, no, thanks everyone for joining. You know, I hope that gave you a bit of insight into how you can use the blocks feature if you're already using RYPT and get more value out of it. And if not, you know, give you a bit more insight into what the platform can provide. So thanks everyone for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.